Epigram by Nekrasov. When from dark error's subjugation my words of passionate exhortation have wrenched thy fainting spirit free, then writhing forth in thy affliction, thou didst recall with malediction those who had encompassed thee. Betrayal into origin. The blue spread of heaven lay upon the sea. She dreamed of Dermot's horsemen in the hills, escorting Aoife to be wed, and victory in Strongbow's arrows, penetrating thrills. On the green heap of Wicklow she poured tea, for her lover and her spread among their pills. In truth, experience can borrow words on spree, and desecrate the harbour of our wills. No foreign hand will ever cup my breast, make of our bitter country a ribald jest. A traitor is a term beyond contempt, betrayal a seepage of the blood. In bonds of trust she lay, her head content. Cultural impurity was not what they would bestow on the children, though the rent of space and time disinherit good. Their vision robbed of right intent, but redeeming imperfection by the flood of joy that was his hand caressing where she had begun her undressing. Yet caresses build up a round of sense, once walked upon a highway for a life, and bonds are made of fingers twining dense cords in the soul. A woman made wife in breach of tradition will hunt the pence forever in the kitchen till the strife breaks over her head like tillage over tents, and brute growth can make her body rife. A graveyard of promises with white stones, a dinner plate piled high with brittle bones. A lover is a fantasy in time, in which the real chases its own tail. Exhausted heads puzzle out the rhyme, and the children tumble down the hill with pale. Their crowns are hurt, and love's sweet, reckless mime is a surly reader of page 3, a body for sale, a legal contract that stops short of crime. She thought she was free, and now a nail scourges her flesh in bondage to her clan. For love's a paved garden and a man. And still in the repast of the flesh, the ghost at the banquet pitched his head upon the plate of warm desire, a fresh bouquet falling. Flowers, white and red, sent their Moorish heaven like a mesh of truth upon a fiction. The dead speak little, yet the ghost gave precious leaving like a splinter she had shed upon the cross they had woven out of song, to tell their hearers that they did no wrong. How could they not but love? Lovers spoke so kind. Those who were righting wrongs could know the truth. His words hurled like stones upon her mind, brought to a sudden end protracted youth. See how the grass bends with the wind. Yet he received her words without ruth, and building justice, brick by brick was blind to the wild tree of creation, yet uncouth, as the menaced souls of people in a slum destroy the garden that the rent men plumb. The nationhood of woman at a loss can emphasize its own bequesting beauty, bequesting spirit, but founded in blood is blameless in the toss of beauty which the lands inherit. God-given gift, sold cheaply to emboss a brazen rouge which you name as merit, a banner, flag, epitome of joss, which in fake ardour a new man will ferret to taint the ages with a hint of mystery that you were real and had a place in history. How did she give herself this tarnished role? How did any man cheat his way to kill? How did his lust linger on her soul against her instinct, passion, mind, and will? How was she branded with predestined scroll, when she loved God and wanted him to fill all her days with longing for the whole, to be at one with him and mercy still? How could she be set against her own, her body, mind, and spirit, so alone? In Lawrence's church in the hurdle-forded town, the Pope had issued a severe decree. The Celtic Church avowed a papal frown. Adrian ran his bull in a spirited sea. The way was narrow and of no renown. A Putcheon still was banged by Saxon fee. 3 spirals grew into a twisted noun, name giving and forsaking women free. By then the unruly place had invented its own ale and imprisoned its own members inside the pale. The centuries rolled by slowly with a crust of meaning underneath the layers of scorn. The land was covered as a Celtic bust in truth and knowledge. Many a poet was born, each prophet stoned who had a mission to dust. Men and women were sold for strangers' corn, while they did sell their spirit and what they sussed, and laid their youngsters on the slab with porn. A hatred for their own. The die was cast by a mob of crazed politicos from Belfast. For ballads there was none to beat the fair city in its hunger for the dark, before Darwin took his monkeys for a rare saunter in the Phoenix Park. However, when it came to passions bare of sentiment and nation in a quark, we went to jail to die from a dare. We preferred death to living in the ark. We took a leap from being Puritan to a faith, and left our own as loveless as a wraith. In the dim days when dancing was a sin, convent girls were taught they mustn't swagger, or fade to where the walls and hopes were thin. The era of rock and roll and Mick Jagger rushed in, and arguments who would win for women's flowering for those who sought to gag her. Salvation was the only goal, and the distant din of wars and rumours made rich the carpetbagger, whose daughters in the convent school for wives had as their daily text quiet, cloistered lives. The holy retreat, when the priests sermonized to warn against the world, the flesh, and the devil. He was among girls, he was born to scorn, and his picture of hell showed many a revel. In his fiery rhetoric he mixed with the porn, the fright of imagination where he could level old charges on the girls in original sin born. Girls innocent for a while, boys would shovel these needs head. A boy at a glance could turn into a fiery devil at a dance. She left school with her honours intact. The boys nearly fainted when they heard. Most men liked to pontificate, making her dismissed as a brainy bird. Male bonding was a heavy syndicate, an intelligent woman something too absurd. Her job would be to type letters in triplicate, and not her own stuff, such was woman's word. She lost her dream of equality in the office. The daytime world was powerless and loveless. So the convent as a bourgeois dream of advantageous desire or prudent concupiscence, she would have to search for love in a different scheme, and opted then for dancing's munificence. Such was her skill with movement, she would redeem those days when all was boring competence. In transcribing notes she'd have independence and esteem. Then night-time and a lover's magnificence, true love and companion to be sought in a daze of mirrors, powder, and the ballroom craze. In her dream, the shadow and the light, tireless in motion, a perpetual star, twinkling with love and incandescent bright, like the difference between male and female are, with luminous form, each man a sight of the deity, as the cosmos each day dances far into infinity with the many on the one, right on a course of complexity, yet on a par with justice, beauty, and salvation. Dancing became her inspiration. This was before the celebrated Minnie, before women's libs scored an own goal. She went dancing every night. It was her destiny, her prayer, her contact with the oversoul. One partner had wet hair, it was stiff and satiny. He was the one who asked her to do the stroll. Another one was tall, another skinny, as they twisted then went on to rock and roll. The ballroom was a class and tribal hunt, with conversation like a daring high-wire stunt. One had pimples and bright red curly locks. His face was pasty, yet he was romancing. He'd bright button eyes with laugh-line shocks, and a motorbike better than any Lansing. He wore check trousers and bright yellow socks. He looked at her as if she were enhancing his life at weekends, scrambling over rocks, and with him be all chancing. The date was forbidden by her mother. He was dangerous and not worth the bother. She dreamt of her ideal and how she would kiss the substance of all shadow, her perfect man. He'd be tall, dark and handsome to bring bliss and grace so natural, perhaps a little tan. She'd know him at once. She'd never miss this man to turn everyone else into an also ran. She'd know love at last, and it was this conviction that made her persist as true love's fan. She lived in the dance and unconscious chaotic will to turn her whole life erotic. She saw him down the splendour of the night, the face for which master painters might have sighed, and his hair lay on his collar. She had the right impulse to hold, yet was frantic inside. They danced each Saturday. It was a rite, private and holy like religion that had vied for their souls, whose goodness like a light came with desires insistent as the tide. He wanted to make love, but she forbade what her mother and the nuns described as bad. He says, "Lie down, my love, on the grass, and we won't give a tuppenny straw or feather for what old women think. I will pass on the bad and good. Now there's a tether to tie the thinker in. The mass of people will never know love, or whether it's true or false. I would bet my cuirass kings will change places with us here together. Love me now, don't leave me halfway there." She said, "Desire is a banister with no stair." "You're suffering from too much education. Thinking like you, I'd rather go spare. Schooling women, next the waste of nation. Next generation will be queer." So spoke her delight, her inspiration. He said she'd ruin her coat on the grass there. What could she do to give him consolation? But her dream was of life, and his so bare. To be left at the crossroads of never was the payment for comely maidens who were clever. So, like a ship which leaves a wall of foam, the dance was more precious than before. His shadow, his tousled hair, and his comb, projecting from his pocket like male lore. To match the red handkerchief, a poem of bleeding streets and dingy record store. And when his denial hit home, she was wounded and scorned to her very core. For he saw in her only a stereotypical woman, one who loved beauty that was common. So her love for a young man so obdurate, her first was pure and had come to grief. And that painful space he left a spirit which fed upon her treasures like a thief. This young man who tried to inspirit beauty, who forced to dream within her brief concourse with him, how he could dispirit not just her yearning for love, but her belief in herself. Heart and mind failed like a widow, as if his death was real and he a Gaelic Bushido. She mourned for him in months of crazy dancing. The Beatles' songs were climbing up the charts. Her pride got a right sore gut lancing, and now she was immune from Cupid's darts. One night, a zombie, she was prancing when a rich young man succumbed to her arts. He asked her to dance, and he was chancing his neck, his wallet, and his fragile parts. She said yes, and he was captivated. He was tired of spoiled girls who titillated. He swept her round the floor in virile leaps. Her hair swept in a dotted scarf. Her God may have left her in mirrored broken heaps, but still there were dreams in the rumpled sod. Ireland. She was young, yet she who reaps before she sows can find a barren rod of angels' tears, dried up and seeps with goodness as if useless for Hod, whose bricks will build an easier tomorrow, if the dancing girl forget her sorrow. She liked him. He was kind. He was nice. A little portly, but with outline sleek. He had money, and yet he had not a vice. And he was unpretentious and quite meek. It could be, in a few months, that rice would be thrown at her in a shower of beak by wedding guests who envied the rich slice of cake she'd captured. A god, not Greek, but rich as Croesus. And to boot, she wouldn't have to worry about loot. But think she did, and then she grew quite worried. The world is badly divided, said her mother. The rich man drove her home, and raindrops slurried down the window pane when they found each other. His gloves at the wheel, yet he wasn't hurried, but gave her time to think. It was no bother. What bride could be seen to be flurried, with such riches in store? Bad luck to smother. Yet would it take away the rights of her brothers if she chose a rich man above the others. Her pals teased her, the big Mercedes put a block of black around her heart. No more could she sing of free days if she were to be bought from the start. He could be a life boy in the sea days, with her heart anchored in the dart of social approval, far from the glee days of Beauty and the Beast, market and mart, when a child would be born to a new dynasty, who might sleep to the lullaby of property. The rich young man was wounded in his pride. Sizzling schemes of run-down city housing, love frozen in an architectural tide, and high-rise flats where the culture's dowsing brought from the town's entrails a wide brief on folkloric custom and carousing. In urban squalor people lived and died. Now they would be subject to delousing. In concrete, with plastic and iron girders, was flattened out beauty with green murders. No park was planned to make the people easy. No blade of grass grew from the concrete floor, nor truth offered shade to the sick and queasy, nor flowers scented the valley of the poor. The sky was blotted out like a speakeasy. What could grow in such an urban sore? How easy for the builder to be breezy, in a summer lawn planting a score of flats and towers, looming to the sky, clustered like battalions for children's hearts to die. And she was wounded by something very slight, a snobbery which made her sort of cringe. His inability to say with friends, good night. There was no one to listen to her twinge of dismay and disbelief in the new sight. Only parties where planners would binge on agreeing that might was right. For her, a community would hinge on the lack of space, so detrimental, people labelled sad, bad, and mental. His family were no different, had traded in Africa and had paid slave wages to blacks to ensure the white world was barricaded in with privilege, guns, dogs, and right-wing hacks. It was a river of sorrow to be waded in, no opportunity for what oppression lacks, freedom, dignity. Her tears cascaded in the century's preference for no-good-in quacks. She left the rich man at her father's gate, rejoicing in her singularly sinless state. Injustice often buries fear in the throat, fear to speak, to act out our liberty. She thought of truth, a never-butting goat. But where was inspiration in liquidity? What jewels and what many-coloured coat are bartered every day for mean cupidity? The flexing roll of muscles for a banknote. Men between torture and stupidity. She loved the poor so intensely, she couldn't care for the rich man immensely. The divine wind had left her. Alone and in the abyss she, bereft bird, trembled with fear, and the lone and love's meaning was absurd. At the funeral of love, an infinity was blown by mourners of romance, and now was heard, deciphering her pain in ceaseless moan. All for want of love, when a single word could have given so much, perhaps a hope, that she could face hard questions and cope. Better seize the root that spreads decay than glitter emptiness upon the poor. An ordinary man with nothing to say is better on the land than on the shore. When the foundation is rotten, who can pay for reconstruction of the temple pure? When dreams are made of gold, who can pray? Or when they're of mud, a wattle door? A woman thus hated, has no fee, cannot be bought, is straight, despised, and free. So she employed a logician to squash forever the poet in her soul. In Dublin the calling of magician made redundant her mother martyr role, as she teased out with care each word's inflection at the exact nature of dearth and dole. The pain of poverty upon reflection, she sought the cure, the universe to toll, as falling through history, a recalcitrant demon meets with the quintessential Irish lemon. For theirs was a fevered generation. The world stood by an ashen tomb, 8 minutes away from ending. In desperation, they made a pact together to face down doom. Go forth and multiply a desecration, so life became a fruitless vacuum. With quotes from revolution and dissolution, they were entangled in the Celtic gloom. Yet to miss her one true love, the greatest fear, according to the pop songs, poured in her ear. A bride without a veil, no photos taken. She was straightway deserted without a tribe, all beauty, love, and happiness forsaken. No dowry, for that was considered bribe. Legally bound, part of an idle squadron, absolved from work, a mute female scribe. She somehow had to bring home the bacon, dry her tears alone after each cruel jibe. While he enjoyed a license to shirk, the Constitution took away her right to work. Sexualized, an abandoned bride, in Christian eyes rotten to the core. Yet there may have been a noble one in pride who wouldn't brand woman as a whore, who would, a comrade by her side, win a world for the dreams of the poor. One like herself, whose exterior belied a really splendid soul, where she could pour the finest ideal of a nation's flower, like a lily in a desperate hour. In class, determinism, and the proletariat, she was now the prey of the Marxist hunt. In her wildest thought was now a lariat, which reduced all expression to a grunt. Exiled, he compared her to Iscariot. Everyone in Ireland a puerile runt, who had refused the poor, and his chariot a bandwagon he mounted for his stunt. To show how equality was made, the highest with the poorest would be paid. Once equal in vision and in conceit, decided immediately they were hitched. With sex and exploration, a hot treat to sustain them if the ideal was ditched. But now it was to turn to cold meat, when reason against passion would be pitched. In objectivity and their hearts beat, a rhythm in which they could be stitched. With disillusionment they were committed, when they learnt all that their parts fitted. Her part was unwritten, unofficially summarized. A woman never bought us without spice. And then those rumours that she paralysed each male libido with her cunning eyes. Ireland, a hag or prostitute, symbolised a virgin tarnished, though she had no price. But prices must through shame be realised. When fire meets fire and ice encounters ice, the bit between her teeth never sweeter to those who lay astride to harm and cheat her. Belfast, your sons come out from sombre morgues. Your courage rains down the streets of the south. You sing your dirges of inflated torques, but your gutters running with a bloodied mouth. We choke on you, a part of archaeology, giants and rings to show we're one nation. Our common heritage is not swapology, but is in fact a poor fool's halting station. Eclectic, but diverse until death, our love like living blooms upon a wreath. The original traders from the sea came to settle in the 5th invasion. Before these we learned to bend our knee. Now there is again our tribal fascination, with stories, Gasa and Forest Imbi. Like our dreams, we grew to a gross gestation. Our labyrinthine structures, our devastation with language and flags and symbols going free. The Celtic cross, the Sheila and the banished snake made exiles of us all, our thirst to slake. But freedom is a kind of strange inversion. It gives power to a new republic's eye, which saw itself for distant to dispersion, could not harbour dissent, that's the why. A caustic lute needed no diversion, and storied cant forbade an inner cry. Who would believe a woman's immersion in a culture where there was no why? The instant it was uttered, a fell-proof dismissal was the Creator's own reproof. First the bishop disavows his son, fails to mention he had sinned with Annie. The government free criminals on the run and rearrest all who can't be canny. Priests and brothers have with kids their fun, abuse a sacred trust while playing nanny. The newspapers squeeze life into a pun to satisfy the few and hurt the many. Women were given poisonous anti-D while a doctor operated who carried HIV. Under the afterglow, a woman he could use, scoring a blue trail for the Belfast streets. God's ugly city daily perused the gospel of the sun and shot red meats. Upon the Milky Way a bloody passion slipped to the umbrella of this lover's guise. His queen, real life, was a slattern, as the blue evening skies became night skies. In truth, he was a lover of pulp fiction, who thought true love lay in body friction. His was the word, hers was the tender flesh. He would give reality its shape. He would hammer out meaning in a mesh of language, and her phrases he would tape. Her ideals and tensions, fresh as the auburn knob which lay upon her nape. Exploring and exploiting he would thresh the seeds of knowledge for the world to gape at him, her admiring and adoring mentor, he godlike progenitor inventor. Mean streets were not encouraging of valour. There was money to be made in being the card. At funerals he could buy and sell her. Life impossible, dealing way too hard. A rabble-rousing bouquet to the mob, a torn asunder ideal soaked in virulence. The mole, the larder and the upstart gob, declaiming hatred of women as a penance. His cant to believe a southern lass who was ignorant of what would come to pass. Fresh from the pageant of his own esteem, he failed to notice that she had a quibble. She had believed she could work with a team, but her country's longing was for a silent Sibyl, woman an object, a property to cream, and now she was just a patriot's dibble. Her imagination and her mind began to teem, and so she began at last to scribble. She decided to give herself to writing verses to distract her from her country's curses. She became the source of instant fame. There was much general celebration. She found she had a calling in which untamed passions like hers were scholarly dissertation. At poetry circles each week she would declaim her lines of poetry to the general population. To him her voice of nationhood was lame, and looked upon it as a kind of desecration. Once more she had betrayed the country's wrong, and he alone judged fit to sing the song. So for Ireland's sake they lay upon the bog, north and south disputing ancestry. upon their joint escutcheon a raging dog, to cheat them a little of their posterity. They joined, they raced, they tumbled to their thrills. She became oblivious to any danger as she lay obedient to God's mills. Grinding narrowly, he became a stranger. And as for her, she simply hadn't reckoned what resulted in being pinned down for a second. Pain has no price quite like that of pleasure. The Belfast man now scrounged for view, as she lay there a violated treasure, her changing mores like a diphthong screw to give her the proper Irish measure. She was now the elect, one of the suffering few, but she could ponder in his sensuous leisure to view in flagrante what he already knew. Anger and betrayal would behove him, for she had written that she didn't love him. You can be blessed knowing the wrong you did. You can celebrate difference till the cows come home. But can you attribute morality to a skid of fashion in a tablet damned by Rome? Can you say you were led by your own lid, forgot to swallow something on writing a poem that led to destruction of your own kid and the contemplation of many a legal tome? For truth and morality went out the door when she didn't fit the precepts of male law. Between the private and the public she was trapped, on the edge of the ideal and the real. The state her independent soul had sapped, and the ethics wouldn't let the personal feel. Something within her spirit now had snapped, yet she refused to let her fear congeal, and wrote of her love of the other still untapped, but stopped from the start to reveal that the fault lay not in her, but in her nation, for making in gender such discrimination. Fate has its decree, and love is bound by infinite odd and mighty circumstance. Whoever we may be, we are as found, a vague entry to the lane of happenstance. Entwined with neighbours we may be round, as lovers be fools or genius with a chance, when emotion is transferred into sound and beauty dwells within a formal dance. For we love one another as we will, the thought is frightening, that we can kill. So can we love where we most despise? Can envy flower without pain? Is it called love when jealousy's a guise to understand our difference in the rain? A friend forever, it's a lifetime prize, but if we're robbed in romancer's lane, we may as well forget the enterprise. Heartbroken and nothing to gain. To try and live in beauty and truth till we die gets no answer from the centuries, asking why. She was not left to right the wrong, so conception became conspiracy, an outrage on a free soul. Left too long, the price so high is ransacked liberty. To nourish what was a source of depravity was to give life to a tattered song, a being to whom no one could belong, except to be an outright travesty. So she did the necessary and sold the good, rent unborn limbs and pillaged motherhood. The treasures of the past of golden splendour are monuments of mind's heroic passion. By now she had indicated her surrender to doctrines that were going out of fashion. Life and equality a nail to rend her, as they peeked beneath her skirt in a session with her own flesh, they condemn her mentor. Her beauty now in distinct recession, the worst to hear now that a child is heaven sent, out of which comes this passing monument. The thought of killing wasn't very central. Dehumanized, she couldn't feel its pain, until afterwards her head split elemental to shoot her daily bullets in the brain. She was defeated now of video rental, in selling her beauty to another Cain. In circumstances it was all so fragmental. Was she there at all? A question in the main. And a baby whose life she had to smother, because she just wasn't just another mother. So ended the life of a precious child. No justification for the ghastly deed. What now of independence, or injustice wild? Just an uncouth admission of a raw-willed need. She was a biochemical property, was riled that he could betray her stream and screed, and put it down to pills which now were filed, like admission on the news reports of greed, that she was the thing, an object to be screwed, like living hell among the rude and nude. Because she had been left out of the story, then believed equality was a point of reference to which they could return in sunset's glory to illustrate her delicacy and deference. He had absconded from the future's hoary, bright winter of her fertile evanescence. Now he wrote diatribe like a Tory who had invented surrender to tumescence, to stop life which wasn't hers to begin with, so without sin he found someone new to sin with. Something so quickly done was his disclaimer, something so agonizing her retreat. In shock it became a way to tame her. In recollection she was just a piece of meat. The boat suspended, all who now could claim her. Her life was put on hold, so to greet her family who didn't mean to maim her, with baby photos, booties with no feet, empty prams and hallways with chipped plaster, showed clearly that her life was a disaster. She had nightmares when a train went whoosh and swept her baby carriage along the rails. She ran through carriages, a vision louche, screamed for her baby, which an empty pram assails. The bullet gone, what's left is a cartouche, where death scrawled in haste of life, which fails even when curtains close upon a couche. The whole train hears her screams and wails, her baby gone forever with a mad scream, because the reality upset the dream. If only she had been herself to start with, instead of indeterminacy and no regard, had found love, a horse and cart with the aloneness of being a woman bard, trapped in definition, no heart but to persuade her that her case was very hard, make her an example and part with her sanity like the deck's last card. His ambition had brought her to here, life contingent on what she held dear. Somehow it seemed that dreams were not for her. She and her child somehow had to pay. Mother, a womb, tomb, each behaved like a cur, feeding on darkness over which to prey. The old sow and her farrow, a real slur, not just literary caveat fashioned to lay upon inverted debts, and thus incur the wrath of God in a single day. It was only a simple operation carried out on women of poor station. You can ask, how did she do such a thing? Stamp on her baby's face and rent the limbs when the child is the brightest jewel in the ring, even with earth's exquisitely blue rims. Her infinite self, a spirit from the king and lord of love, but a robber never skims, but takes the centre of the bowl to sing in praises of her soul's imperious whims. Now you understand, it's difficult to bless life when heart and soul must here regress. The rift between them a chasm as before, her mother's servitude and sacrifice, gripping on nothing, the person was no more, she had become a means. It wasn't nice. Endless as the waves on the pebbled shore, leading to selflessness and other vice. So daughter saw in mother an old sore, a handle to a hand of bad advice. In the state of nature there was corruption, or an evil eye, ready for eruption. Now she answers that she cannot allow for the love and beauty in her heart be a travesty in the substance of a row, like unity in her country torn apart. She held grace like a necklace on the bow of a dazzling ship bedecked with light and art. But she couldn't accept involuntarily to endow another with life while playing the observer's part. So they moved in with a license and a twist to add killing after killing to the list. Thousands of seedlings left to die alone on a petri dish, whose first cry is their last. This lesser of two evils is heard to moan for a second before the knife is cast into the womb, and the two now well known into the ache of the abyss. The executioner's vast indifference to each solitary groan, as ever an instant head to death is past. For unborn life we have no right to smother, for joy and hope die, and the love of mother. Reckon not these ways and be an artist, where all is justified every blessed sin, to live the life and be diurnal chartist of daily killing and the experience revel in. make the world a shroud in order to subsist, be deaf to music and the din of unborn babies murdered by a fascist endeavour to make the whole fit in. Young and wronged, a little creature instead of life, will in a story feature. How can it be that in our troubled history there are still no stories of the unborn? How in the unfolding of this mystery are womanhood and nationhood torn? As they lay above the sea in their consistory of hope to shield them from the age's scorn, that its wrack and blood-stained bestiary would vanish in the golden heads of corn. The land, our love, our unutterable lacks, bringing us the grave, our wanton hacks. If love's the word, how comes such a union led to relentless and unceasing gripe? Bad fate led to a false communion which was loved only for its hype. Belief that mother and child need reunion with gifts and auguries before they are ripe. He took the run and bundled to the union, where he swore in triplicate in type. For her ambition she got the man's rate, for proving she was equal and his surrogate. Can you imagine how the centuries' trust enfolded nature like a beauty given to the heart of man and woman, a crust on which the eternal word is leaven? Beauty and truth were green when the dust of cities rose above the plain. A heaven was lost, the sobs and thralls of lust in the oiled machine of love and earth riven. And on this broken wing a song of pain lay on the heart like fermenting grain. So a countryman comes to the city, idolizing woman as the land, to bring forth children without pity, and the harsh town is made of yellow sand. Money buys silence, and an arcane ditty will supplant the ballads to be panned by sophisticates whose paper bond is witty epigram on abstract wealth and band in the new country, a connection to the soil whose perfume undergoes the work of toil. Yet our tarnished history gives such a story, Maeve with her friendly thighs and stamping bull, Emer discreet with mischief before the hoary compliments of her suitor who would cull Ireland's forest before he traduced the glory of her breasts and territorial claims annul. For 3,000 years, nationalist and Tory fought for our northeast corner for a hull, ever resurgent on the bloody sea, and turned us into traitors, you and me. So we were born to secrets age to age, some shot at funerals, buying silences to spring, in the music of our hearers, grief and rage, the hope one day like her, who cling to song as the expression of her mage. One day there'll be a perfect ring, as the heeded sayings of its age, as warrior women to their babies sing, born from where they were torn and sundered, from that first dream where we freely wandered. It may be that the hunger still has grip, as the city slickers rooted in obscurity, withered like the haw, whose bright red tip lost in the seasonless clay of insecurity. The petty clerkships and the unctuous lip keeps crumbs on the palate, while the purity of good languishes at the crossroads, a pip to be spat out at futurity. Ciphers on a banker's ledger sheet, zeroed figures replacing a stack of wheat. The bogs which guard the heritage of the past today yielded up a ton of butter. The wicker wrapped corbel like an interest, cast on living truths which we have lost, to splutter down the ages like a scholiast, whose ornate calligraphy is the abstract stutter of people's shame, disowning heritage for caste, and intricate feeling for a slavey's mutter, the sharp distinctions of race and age, frozen in complicated beauty on the page.